Wow, that's awesome. That's pretty fascinating. I like how so you said it's like other companies, but it seems like, or other cognac makers, but it seems to me that you try to rebuild, I don't know how you want to frame it, but rebuild the brand by just tapping into the history, tapping into the tradition, and just starting there.
That's what I did. One thing I started with, and it's a true story, is I went to Cognac and I visited the Cognac Museum. And so I went to visit the Cognac Museum, which has obviously...
We got to do that together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the Cognac Museum...
we already told the family, so we're ready to go to Cognac with you.
Yeah. So the Cognac Museum, it just happened, is now, I don't know, 20 feet away from the house that I actually bought in Cognac. But at the time, I didn't have a house, first time I went there. And so what happened is the Cognac Museum and my house is in the oldest street of Cognac. It's called Rue Saulnier. It's the most famous, oldest, original street where the cognac industry started. So I bought the house, which is supposed to be one of, if not the oldest house in Cognac. And therefore, the museum is just next to my house. I went to visit the museum and I looked at all the cognac display, which is 100% of the museum. The Cognac Museum is all about not just cognac, because they talk about the history before cognac, which was wine, salt, and vinegar. But I mean, the 80% of the story is really focused on the cognac. And there, I found a lot of Commandon display. So that was my first visit. So I found the Commandon display. I found a presentation of bottles, labels, and eventually, and this is a true story, is I ran into a gentleman who collected cognac labels. I forgot his name. He was a very sweet gentleman. He was in his 90s back then, 10 years ago. And I met him, and he was just the most amazing guy. His collection is, I don't know, 100 times bigger than the next person. So it's and he was actually acquired by, when he passed away, by the Cognac Museum. So now they probably have even bigger display. And so I met with him, and he was very passionate about label, and I was very passionate about reviving Commandon. So he actually helped me and showed me lots of labels, hundreds of labels of Commandon. And at the Cognac Museum, I could also see some other ones. So I had all of these labels, and based on all of these labels, I started a collection of labels. And I can show you one here. I didn't prepare this, but I started a collection of labels, reviving some of the shape of the label. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this very well.
Yeah, now I can see right there.
Yeah, so see this, we call this the cloud. It looks like a little cloud. And so we revived this little cloud shape, which was a label from like 1880 or something like this from Commandon. So I revived this label, and I did very well, and I tried to use it now and then. But there's a lot of elements that I revived. I obviously used, what's funny is that the original logo was used until the 60s. And so it's what it is it's a shield. Original label is a crown and a palm tree. And it was used till the late 60s. And then the late 60s, they removed the palm tree and they put a cedar tree. And so what happens is, so that's an interesting piece of history for you, is that in Cognac, there's lots of cedar tree. And they changed it to the cedar tree because they figured that a palm tree for Cognac made no sense. Right? So that was like decision made in 1969. So they removed the palm tree. But when I relaunched the brand, I mean, I can tell you one thing, they're very small, but the palm tree went right back in. And why is that? Because that's the original. That's the 1821 logo. So in 1821, Pierre Commandon was the first one. And in 1821, he had only a palm tree. And the reason he had a palm tree is because in Cognac, people were very proud of being merchants and doing a lot of business overseas. Not everyone in France had overseas business as much as Cognac. I mean, Cognac, it was between 50% to 100%, right? And so these people traveled, and they had to travel, or they had people coming and all this. So the first thing that these people would do is they would fix the farmhouse into a mansion. And then the mansion, if they were lucky, became a manor. And if the manor, if they're lucky, became a castle.
And they collect everything from around the world.
Yeah, and once they had the castle, and you can see this, the day you go in Cognac, you'll see it 95% of the time. If you see a castle, in front of the castle, you have palm trees. And these have been there for hundreds of years.
Wow.
And then that does not register to people because they didn't realize that. But when the people in Cognac, when they know, they all ask me, why a palm tree? I mean, Cognac palm tree. Look at all the successful Cognac businesses and see if they have palm tree. They all have palm trees. So I think he was a brilliant man for actually taking the palm tree and putting it as a sign of exotic, international success. And, you know, having a palm tree was like eating oranges 100 years ago. That was a big deal. And so that was what it is. Then he married a French aristocratic lady. And so in 1832, he married this duchess. And so he took the crown of a duchess, which is, I think, 9 points. They have 9 little points. And then he put the 9 points on top of the palm tree. I mean, why not? You know, I mean, he was probably a really cool guy, I think, you know. It's like, okay, now I married this duchess, you know, probably like a funny thing. No, I deserve the crown, you know, and then he put the crown on top of his palm tree. So I thought this was delightful, and there was no way I was going to put the cedar in there, even though it's another tree. I want people to ask me why there's a palm tree in Cognac. You go in Cognac, there's the 2 warmest places in France is the French Riviera and the Cognac region. As you get closer to the ocean, you see more and more palm trees because they do very well there. It's very tempered. It has a very bad, how do you say, tempered weather and all that. It's the warmest places in France, 2 warmest places. So the palm trees do very well. So that's why I use reuse these elements which have been used for the longest time. In fact, if you look at most of the labels, you have the crown on the palm trees 95% of the time. The cedar came later, and I think that was a step down to put a cedar in there. So there's just no way. So I think it's a story that I should be telling people more often, and that way they can see there's a lot of soul, there's a lot of history in Comandon, and I try. Essentially, all I do is I try to keep the flame going with my dad, and we're trying to do justice to the things that were done before, and if possible, we're trying to make them even better than these people had done before. And I think to some extent we have, because we want, I want 3-time world best cognac maker, and looking at the history and archives, I found that the Commandant had won 1 time when they were in charge. So the brand won 1 time. I think it was 1869 or something like this. There was a London World Exposition at that time, and they were giving prizes, and they actually won. And actually what I did is I searched the medal. And so for 10 years, I was searching the medal that they won, and I actually found the medal eventually on eBay in Romania or whatever. And so I bought the medal that Commandant won in 1869. And so it's back in, we have a small museum in Cognac in our house, and right there it's for display.
That's fascinating. That's right up my alley, man. That's beautiful.